Hey there, fellow soul anarchist. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Nick Pollard.
Wishing you had done things differently is pretty normal, but you can't let it take over your life. If you're new here, I'm a former people pleaser and recovered alcoholic, and I help people overcome both. Who you want to be is hiding behind everything you refuse to do. And I'm not talking purely about procrastination. People pleasers experience compassion fatigue, which is one of the most fascinating characteristics of burnout. So I hear you set some boundaries and nobody's really paying attention. Here's the most important thing you need to know about setting boundaries. Nobody is required to give a shit. The reason narcissism keeps showing up as a problem in your life has nothing to do with the narcissists themselves. I was a cheating, lying, manipulative drunk, and I blamed everybody else for it. You're so attached to this version of your identity that making changes has become impossible. You're so afraid to let go of that thing that you think makes you you. You have to let go of the shit that you know isn't serving you. The hardest thing I ever learned was it's not enough to know. The change is in the doing. People-pleasing and addiction share a really dangerous characteristic. If you're new here, I'm a former people-pleaser and recovered alcoholic, and I help people overcome both.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about people-pleasing. We're going to talk about addiction. He's going to make a case for why they're related. We're going to talk about why Anthony Bourdain is perhaps the greatest American writer. And aside from addiction and people-pleasing, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and his journey in turning his experience into a business, including a little story about him crying into a bowl of cereal. Pretty sure there were tears involved in that, I think. Right, Nick? Without any further ado, I give you Nick Pollard.
So it's weird how, I think it's weird for me. Maybe it's not weird, but it's weird for me how much I hear it. People say that kind of thing to me. I'm like, wise. All right, I'll go with it.
Well, that's kind of the crux of what I want to talk to you about today is your role as a content creator. I mean, obviously in the context of being a coach, but as I prepared for the show, in my mind's eye, I'm picturing a person who's been through something and they're now coming out the other side and they have this urge to share and pass their wisdom along. And so I would love to know what you've learned along your journey of doing that. So I guess first things first, would you give us just a synopsis of the chapter of your life when you were in the depth of your addiction so we can kind of have some context of where you come from?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I was about 29. I'd kind of been doing my life the way everybody told me to for a long time. And, the inspiration for that, of course, is, how I was raised, which, by my dad and, kind of following in his footsteps. Well, he turned out to not be who I thought he was. And that sort of threw me into kind of a, I would say almost a psychopathy tailspin in many regard. Like I was suicidal and I was homicidal and I was a pure plain train wreck. And that kind of shift in reality caused me to have a real existential crisis that I didn't really know how to deal with. I mean, 29 years old, I've been doing it the same way for, nearly 30 years at that point. And I think I probably had a drinking problem prior to that. Like I like to drink a little more than the average person. But it never really got out of hand. And then probably around 29 and 30 is when things started to get a little messy. And that's when I really fell apart the first time. Right. So, and that included some cocaine and some drugs and some pot and some drinking, and then cleaned up my act, probably 2010, 2011. Kind of got better. Fast forward about 6 years and my father passed away, and that reopened all this crap that I hadn't dealt with. And that was right around 2016. And sure enough, I went worse. Like it got worse than it had been before. And it stayed that way for about 3 years. I was probably drinking 13 or 14 double vodka sodas a day.
Okay.
So, plus minus 27 to 35, shots a day, was a pretty normal Tuesday for me.
So a couple bottles a day.
Yeah, generally speaking. Yeah.
Damn.
And when I look back on it, I'm like, holy shit, I drank a lot. And it was a lot. So, and then of course, to keep up that level of alcohol, you're going to need some stimulants. So, back into my life came cocaine. And then, you parlay that into, 2-3 years of pretty solid drunken behavior. I owned a company at the time that was kind of built around partying too. So that made it even more challenging, of course. And it was right around the end of 2017 that it was really kind of at its worst. My wife had left me. My business had fallen apart. My business managers, or not my business manager, my business partner, I ended up just handing him the company, and kind of walking away from everything because I couldn't handle it anymore. And I was sitting at a bar in 2018. It was April 16th. I called my mom and I said, if this doesn't change, I'm going to die. So I need you to come get me and take me to a detox center like now. And then while I'm in there, you need to figure out what I need to do to get out of my lease in my apartment. And then once I get out, we'll do that. And then I need to go to rehab. And that's not happening.
Wow. What was the business that was kind of centered around partying?
Have you ever seen those pedal pubs? They look like buses with pedals on them. I think they have them in Salt Lake.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to own 3 of them.
Okay. So you're a fun time guy.
Yeah, I was partying all the time. And, I'd wake up. So like on a Sunday, this is a great example of that. Like Sunday morning, I would get up. And I think I'm far enough removed from it that I can't be prosecuted at this point. But I'd get up on Sunday morning and I would go to the bar. I would order food of some kind, usually eggs Benedict or fried steak and eggs or whatever, something that was hearty. But I'd also have like 2 cocktails. And then my first tour would be, I'd get there at 9. My first tour would be at 11. And I would go from like 11 o'clock in the morning until, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And I'd be drunk the whole day. Right.
Yeah.
So I'd have 2-3 drinks on every tour just to maintain. And I was functioning. Like I don't know that I could call myself drunk. I was just addicted. So I was, kind of drinking all the time. And that's when I realized it was kind of a problem and, decided it was time to do something about it. So,
right. So, I think you kind of already mentioned this, but what was the one moment where you realized like, okay, like this has got to change. It's time to turn around. Like that decisive hour.
I woke up next to a friend of mine. And she was a lovely human. She'd asked to stay the night. We'd slept together a couple of times. She was very loving to me. And I remember rolling over and hugging her and saying, I'm really sick. And she said, I know. And that was kind of the moment, like I was walking the bar and it kind of felt like everything had changed. And then I sat at the bar and everything just kind of looked different. It didn't feel like home anymore. And the bar had felt like home to me for a long time. Because I think I realized that nobody liked me. And that was really painful. Like, I look back at my time in Denver, and I think in the beginning, everybody thought I was just kind of a weirdo. And, I was driving these bike bars and I was a nice enough guy, but I was kind of a disaster. I think nobody really liked me. I think probably they still don't. And I kind of had that realization and recollection of not having any friends. Like nobody really gave a shit. Like if I was to die tomorrow and they posted that on Facebook, probably the entirety of Denver wouldn't give a fuck. And when I had that realization, I was kind of looking at my bartenders who I thought were my friends, and all of that started to occur to me. And I'm like, oh, maybe if I'm going to live, there's probably a better way.
Gotcha. Was there something about her? It sounds like there's something about her acknowledgement that flipped a switch for you, like her witness of that. Am I hearing that right?
Well, maybe. She knows who she is. And if she ever hears this, Holly, you know who you are. But I actually wrote her a letter about it a long time ago, just kind of outlining that in detail. And I think there was I think there was a caring in her voice that I didn't hear from anyone else. I think that may have been the shift that happened for me, is like she gave a damn. And I was like, oh, well, maybe somebody does care about me. And then like from that, I was able to ferret the response of like, maybe that's not, maybe this is normal. Maybe your people are supposed to care about you. And then when I got to the bar, I was like, oh, nobody here cares about me, because they're going to let me sit here and kill myself all day. Right. They're not going to tell me to eat. They're not going to tell me to go home. They're not going to tell me to go to rehab. They're going to sit here and let me kill myself all day.
Right.
And then they're going to make fun of me after I leave. Right. And it was really fucking painful. And I won't bus roll any of those humans, but they also know who they are. Right. And it was a challenge, a real challenge.
Do you consider that rock bottom, like the quintessential rock bottom?
Nope. It took me another try.
Okay. So there's this conventional wisdom about rock bottom that, addicts need to hit a rock bottom before they really make meaningful change. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think addiction is, so one of my very good friends and clients is a doctor in the addiction field. And he would tell you that they know about as much about addiction as you and I do. It's, there's a lot of theory. I mean, Gabor Mate talks about this quite a lot. And, Russell Brand, who I know is, out of favor at the moment, but hopefully will return, talks about this quite a lot. Addiction for me was really the lack of connection, was really what it equates to. And if you look at some of the things that are happening worldwide with that, Portugal's really doing something spectacular with it, where rather than enforcing addiction law or punishing the shit out of addicts, they take them out of the system and they drop them into rehab centers voluntarily. They say, hey, if you get a heroin ticket, for instance, you go in front of a panel and they go, all right, the fine's like $22. And would you rather keep fucking up, or do you want to go to rehab? And like 99% of them are like, yeah, please send me to rehab. I don't, like, nobody wakes up and goes, yes, heroin addiction.
Right.
And I dealt with a lot of those folks. And so, they send them to rehab. And then when they get out, they don't just kind of kick them to the wolves and say, best of luck. They're like, okay, so now what do we need to do? Like, let's put you in a sober home so you can reacclimate. And they do that. And they're like, let's get you a micro loan so you can buy a car and like drive for Uber, or so you can start a business, or like, let's reacclimate you into getting you into school so you have a trade and a purpose. And then this damnedest thing is happening. It's like they're stopping using heroin.
That's beautiful.
Because they're no longer disconnected, right? They're able to integrate into society rather than feeling alone. And I think, in my work, you look at the people pleasing kind of narrative against what it means to be addiction, or what addiction means in my language. And they're the same. and if you see that, you're like, oh shit, that's a problem. There's so many people that are in active addiction to pleasing other people.
I watched one of your clips on YouTube where you talked about people pleasing in an addiction model because of the dopamine release. And I'd never thought of it that way before. But when you laid it out, it made perfect sense. It's just another little drug that our own body manufactures, and people get addicted to that. I mean, so I found that really fascinating. On this topic of connection, would you flesh that out just a little bit more? What kind of connection is lacking that's driving the addiction?
More often than anything, and again, I'm speaking purely on opinion in my experience, it's the lack of connection to self rather than, it's kind of a lack of oneness or loneliness, and understanding who you are, and being okay with who you think you are not being who you are. That was one of the things, like I thought I was a lot of things, and I'm not. And that's okay, right? Like I thought I was a lot of shit that I'm not those things. And I see it all over social media, like ADD posts and PTSD and CPTSD and people identifying with their traumas. I'm like, come on, guys, like, what are we doing? But that's not who you are. That's a part of your experience. It's part of your lived experience. You can choose what to do with that. And for too long, I had chosen to do the wrong shit with my lived experience. And that's all it was. I chose alcohol and drugs because they were easy. Right? That was an easy solution to a very complex problem.
So to reiterate, you're talking about, I mean, this does remind me of what Russell Brand talks about, the lack of connection to self. It's almost like a spiritual thing versus connection to other people.
Right.
Connection to society.
Well, and by connecting to you, you open the connection door to other people. That's the thing. Is like people, the whole people pleasing thing is so important to me. And the whole boundaries thing is so important to me. Not because like it's a really good marketing tool. I mean, it is, but that's not why I started talking about it. Because I lived it. Right? Like I lived it. I knew like there's something wrong. And I figured this out in my second bounce off the wall in sobriety. It's like I had a lot of cool stuff. Like I had a job. I was making great money. I had an apartment. I had a girlfriend that was, okay. And I stressed that. It's really, she was okay when she was, and then most of the time she wasn't, but you get the idea. And, that caused me to realize, like, when we broke up in January of 2020, I was like, I don't like who I am. And I didn't like my job, and I didn't like my life, and I didn't like her. And I thought I liked all that. I really thought that's what I wanted. It was like a swinger girlfriend, and like I wanted to make a bunch of money. I was going to be a gazillionaire. And I was going to do it with roofing. I was going to be like super cool.
Right.
And I was none of that shit. So then the existential crisis returns, right? Where I'm like, oh, fuck, now I'm back at this right now. So I stumbled my fat ass into an AA meeting at 8:00 in the morning on January 11th of 2020. and fucking hit the reset button.
In Denver.
Right. No, this was in Huntington Beach, California.
Oh, much better weather. Okay.
Much better weather.
Okay,
and fascinatingly, this was like right after COVID. So the only meetings that you could attend were outdoor. So this was a beach meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It still goes on every day. I don't go to AA anymore. I'm kind of beyond that part of my journey, but it's, I mean, that's how it happened. And listen, if anybody is, kind of thinking they want to try and get sober, or they're really struggling with alcohol, AA is not a bad plan. It's just not my plan. And it was a good place for me to get started. Like I was able to walk through I was able to walk the first 3 months with some people, and some people that were doing it, and they kind of encourage you. And then, I had walked to that path before, so I kind of knew that sobriety wasn't the problem for me.
Right.
Like I figured out how to do sober. Right. Sober's easy.
The missing piece.
Well, I mean, sober's easy. You just don't drink.
Sure.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah. It was figuring out how to do me, and to do so without making so many fucking apologies and feeling terrible about myself. I'll never forget it. I sold everything I owned, moved to California. I'm gonna sneeze. But I sold everything I owned. I moved to California. I was living in an Airbnb on the corner of 10th and Orange in Huntington Beach. And by Airbnb, I mean, it's like a surf shanty. And there I had 5 roommates and 1 bathroom and no kitchen space. And, I humbled myself in a lot of ways to do that. And then right after that, I think it was in February or March, probably February. I was on the phone with a friend of mine. And it occurred to me that I was unhappy. It wasn't that I was unhappy in Huntington Beach, but I wanted to see the world, and I'd always wanted to see the world. And I had a little money, not a lot. I think I had, at the time, I had like 12 grand left, and I booked a ticket to Costa Rica. And I had my unemployment coming in from COVID, and I left. I didn't turn around for 2 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You said something earlier I want to touch on. You mentioned, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this, there was something about kind of giving up on ideas of what you think you are, and kind of accepting like the kind of the nothingness of who you are.
Sure.
Could Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So I think one of the missing components to sobriety for a lot of folks is the idea of self and like how you're supposed to identify, right? And that was one of the reasons I don't do AA anymore is I won't sit in a room and tell you that I am a thing. Like I'm not going to sit and tell you I'm an alcoholic for the rest of my life. It feels counterproductive to me. So I had to let go of all the notions of who I was and who I wanted to be. There are really four people in your brain that are fucking around at any given time. You have like who you are, right? Who you actually are, who you think you are, right? Then you have who you want to be, like actually want to be, and then who you think you want to be, right? So the two that are the most important to get communicating are the ones with the actual voice, right? Like who you actually are and who you actually want to be. When you can figure those two things out, you realize that you're already one, and you're already who you are, right? And you're already who you want to be. You just have to keep moving and you'll be there, right? It's just a progress over time. Nobody, the game doesn't stop until your heart stops beating. That's the deal, right? And if you know that, then okay, so you're never going to be where you want to be. That's the damnable misery of life. Is that like the minute you win, it's over.
Right.
So
this idea of a point on the horizon, it being a destination versus just a point.
Right. Like when I have $1 million, I'll be happy. When I have a big house, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
When I have, quit postponing your happiness. Fucking be happy.
What helped you reconcile those two things and like surrender into that?
Great word. Surrendering to it. Acceptance and surrender. Honestly, it's like, I had to accept that I was wrong. Like I was wrong about who I was. And I built this life. So I built that life from, my early 20s, 10 years. I built a career around what I thought my dad would want, and then fell apart for my 30s. And then like the late part of my 30s, the latter part, I was making great money again. And I've fallen into all the old traps and doing the thing. And, spending more money than I needed to and doing all the BS that comes along with, kind of creating a decent amount of wealth relatively quickly. And, I just had to accept that wasn't me. And like everything I thought I wanted, I didn't really care about. And that kind of led me down a minimalist path for a little while where I got really about that, which was funny. It was a funny part of my journey. But
did you have like a mentor, or was there a moment of epiphany or something that helped you to give into that surrender, though? That's what I'm curious about.
I think so. I think when I booked the ticket to Costa Rica, something shifted in my heart. Because I was going alone. And I think I knew that. Like, I think once I felt alone, I was like, oh, like, I'm the only friend I got. Really.
Right.
And
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the alone part, because in all of the spiritual traditions, the gurus always have their epiphany in solitude. Yeah. Jesus in the desert, Muhammad in the cave, the Buddha under a tree. It's all follows the same basic pattern. Is that kind of, was Costa Rica your 40 days in the desert, so to speak?
It didn't turn out that way because somebody ended up joining me along that path.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't end up going alone. I just booked it alone.
Got it.
And I did end up spending 2 years traveling with my now girlfriend, which has been awesome. And we're still together, and we're here in Huntington Beach, and we're doing a thing.
Cool.
But there were some times along that journey that I was alone, very much alone. Like in 2021, I spent Christmas by myself, which was weird for me. And I was in another country. So I was in Panama in a silly little beach hut, surfing every day, but I was alone. And
yeah, it sounds like a key here is that you had a willingness to be alone. Like when you booked the ticket, you're like, I'm going alone, and you happen to accrue some company along the way, but there was that intention.
Yeah, I mean, I had to be willing to just do it, to do it.
Right.
And growth is very much, most of it's done alone. And then everybody thinks like you have to have a mentor, you have to have. I read a lot, and then in my brain, the way that it functions, I'm very visual, and one of the people that I admired very much was Richard Branson for a long time. I used to play, and I was like having a conversation with him, like, what would you do here? And I'd hear his, the English voice say, you're being a wanker or whatever. And, but now I've even kind of leaned further into that, and my inner child work and how I function as an entrepreneur is very different now. Like I don't see my company as a thing. I see it as a person.
Mm.
And it's just me. My company is just me. It's me and one other person. I have an assistant. She's great. You've met Valerie.
Yep. Terrific.
And so it's just us, but I talk to the company like it's a person.
So will you walk us through that point of time between, your coming out of addiction and kind of straightening out, and then realizing like, okay, now I want to, turn into a coach. I want to help people. I want to, what's that little chapter like?
What's that transition?
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I've been a coach for 15 years. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when was your initial foray into coaching?
So my first coaching experience was in 2009, when I was getting divorced. I had convinced myself that at 29, I wasn't going to be able to find a girlfriend, because I didn't know anything about meeting women or whatever. And the empirical evidence to that is, still indicates the opposite. But so I had convinced myself I didn't know how to meet women. So I went about the task of learning how to do that academically, and ended up in the pickup artist world.
Yes.
So
I've read the game too. I've been there, done that.
Yep. And I've met Neil. In fact, Eric, otherwise known as Mystery, and I are still to this day. I just talked to him yesterday.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Apparently he's decided to come back into the world as a teacher again, and his social media presence is absolute garbage. So I've got
to see that. I haven't thought about Mystery in a long time, but what a character. Oh my gosh. I love that you talked to him.
Yes,
that's so great.
So they're teaching again, which is funny. And it was only recently I saw him pop up, and I was like, I sent him a text, a DM through Instagram. I'm like, hey man, I read your book like 15 years ago, and it really helped me. And your social media presence sucks, and I want to help you fix that. He's like, what's that going to cost? And I'm like, I know there's zero goodwill inside of the pickup artist community, but I just want to help. I'll write you a few scripts. You do what you're going to do. I don't charge for this. It's not a thing that I do. I just kind of know what I'm doing better than you do. So now he and I are chatting, and a whole funny chapter. But
that's fantastic.
So I did the PUA thing, and I was very, very good at it. So in my 30s, I was, early 30s, I looked really good. I still do for a 43-year-old man. And, but I didn't realize that what they were teaching, what I was learning in the game and through the mystery method and all these, forms of communication. Well, it was just sales approaches.
Yeah.
It was just sales pitches. And it didn't even occur. And I've been in sales my entire life.
Okay.
Right. So I'm getting really good. I'd open, hit the next thing, hit the next thing, hit the next thing.
Overcoming objections,
and I'm doing really well. And I'm like, why am I so good at this? And one of my friends like, wow, you're really good at this. And I was like, okay. So yeah, maybe I could teach other people. And then I started to teach a little about what I was going through and how I was figuring it out. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I stopped for so I did this for 2 months and I stopped. I had this hard stop moment. I'm like, wait a minute. This sounds like telemarketing. And I'm like, so I go back to it. I'm like, opener, enticement, escalation. I'm like, oh God, this is telemarketing.
It totally is.
Right. So I have this moment that I'm like, I'm a sales trainer. Right. And I'm like, all right. So what are we teaching then? And then it occurred to me that what was happening was we were actually not teaching men how to pick up women, and we were giving them false confidence. Because in sales, the more we script your approaches, the more you know what to say, the more confident you become, right? So when you look at top 5 sales organizations, they are scripted to the T, like bam, 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 word for word is how you memorize those scripts, right?
Right.
Even all the objections, even all the overcoming objections, everything. Memorize, memorize, memorize. Just knock it out. And I learned that from a company called Norvergence back in the day. And they had exploded on the telecom scene and done really, really well. And I was like, okay, so if we're teaching confidence, why don't we just give them actual confidence and stop training them to be these douchey magicians that walk around at bars all night long?
Fuzzy hats and card tricks and
fuzzy hats and card tricks and high heels and and Mystery's still doing this shit.
Is he seriously still wearing fuzzy hats?
Dude, it's the same guy. He's just 53 years old now.
Okay.
It's unbelievably awful. Anyway, so this all goes down. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to figure that out. So I then attended a few coaching workshops on how to do that and really understood what coaching is. Now, my mom's a PhD in therapy or marriage and family therapy. So I've got really kind of a long background in this. So I understood how to do this. Well, I picked up coaching very fast because, again, it's all very much sales language and understanding and empathy and all those things. Okay, great. So then I started working with guys and we started functioning in this, idea. What does it look like to become confident, getting your belief systems out of your way? Well, I then go from dudes that are like trying to win game to trying to be human, and they are crushing it at meeting women. And I had at that time, my practice was all men. And I was teaching in bars. So I would go to the bar. I haven't told this in so long, like 5 o'clock on a Thursday, right? We go Thursday and Fridays when I go. We go at like 5 right before bar open. And the bar owners knew I was coming. So they'd set it up. They'd service drinks and I would teach and I had whiteboard and I'd do the things. And right. Well, we stumbled into one place that this time it was called the Armory. It was in Denver. So it's now closed, but we went into this bar and I was going to teach there for that night. And I'm teaching and I have all the guys kind of in a half circle, right? And I'm talking about how they function and they're talking about how I function. We're doing the thing. And I'm showing them confidence and I'm coaching, like really coaching in front of people. And this group, this bachelorette party, they forgot to lock the door. So this bachelorette party kind of just stumbles in, right? And they see this group of, kind of weird looking nerdy dudes.
It's a den of lions.
Right. And they're like, what the fuck is this now? Are you guys having an AA meeting? And they're like, ha, ha, ha. And they're making fun of us. Well, I just keep teaching. Right. And they're like, wow, this is really good information. Well, so they end up staying for the 30, 40 minutes that we have left. And then they're playing the games with the guys. It turned out to be a really fun. Right. And then a bunch of the guys ended up going out with them that night. They had fun and it was really cool. Right. Well, I had handed my cards out to everybody. And like 2 days later, I get a phone call from the maid of honor. And she's like, hey, would you teach what you were teaching to me and my friends? And that day was the day that my clientele shifted from men to exclusively women.
Oh,
I couldn't keep up with demand.
Fascinating. So what was the difference in curriculum between what you're teaching the men and teaching the women?
There was none.
Fascinating.
It was all about confidence and dating. Why do I keep attracting douchebags? Well, let me explain. And then I would walk through their limiting beliefs and their fears and I would help them accelerate. So we keep doing this, right?
Right.
Well, then I run across another now former business partner of mine and friend, JP Flom, and we started a company called Phobia. Phobia was my parlaying back into the sales world, and we actually would take the top 20% of salespeople in an organization and train them to overcome fear and limiting beliefs and accelerate their performance. We were seeing performance increases of like 30 and 40% on the top line. Wow. Because if I take the top 20% of anything and I make it 5% better, it increases the total number by massive margins, right?
Right. That Pareto principle thing at work, right?
Right. So we did that. That company was very successful. And then I took a break from coaching and I turned into a drunk for about 6 years. And that's when I started the bike bar company. And then I came back to coaching in 2018. So when I graduated from the rehab center, me being me, I walked into the administrator's office and said to the woman there who owns it, her name's Mary, Mary Brewer. By the way, if you need to go to a rehab, New Beginnings Recovery Center in Denver is the one. But Mary Brewer, I walk into her office and I said, hey, there's some gaps in the coverage here. Like, there are gaps in this program. And then she goes, what are they? And I tell her and I outline how to fix them. She says, well, why don't you just fix them then? And I went, I mean, I can't see why not. And she said, do you have a curriculum? I'm like, I can have it drawn up for you in like 2 hours. So I drew up a curriculum. I ended up taking, so you got into the rehab and you were in phase 1 and then they move you over to phase 2. I took over the phase 2 groups. So I would then teach all of the second part. They're kind of less raw and they could handle some more emotional pressure. So I took over those phase 2 groups. I did that for 9 months. I facilitated thousands of people transitioning in and out of recovery.
Wow.
And then fell apart again, went into roofing for a little while. And then it was this run at coaching started in 2020. I was broke and sitting in my room in Southern California in this very town, 10 blocks from this very spot that I sit. And I remembered that my love of that work was real. And that's all I wanted to do. And I said, I'd rather be broke and be a coach than, be a miserable roofing salesman.
I love that.
And that's when I started working on the channel. I started recording stuff. And then I really got serious about recording in, I think I want to say it was July of 21. I got real serious about recording. So it's been like 2.5 years now. And I started putting out like a video a day. Then it was 3 videos a day. It was 5 a day. And then I hired a kid named Stone Frederickson. He's a TikTok coach. And he taught me how to TikTok. And the rest was history.
Interesting. I know a lot of the people that are going to watch this are aspiring content creators or are already kind of trying their hand at it. And you've mentioned this a couple times in your videos that in the beginning your stuff sucked,
Oh, yeah.
and you didn't know what you were doing and all these things. So I'd love to hear more about your journey as a content creator. Like, did you know that it sucked in the beginning? Were you painfully aware of it? Like, what was that like in the very beginning stages, making your first couple of videos?
I don't know if I knew that it sucked.
Yeah.
But I knew it wasn't good.
Okay.
So like, I don't think you can know how awful something is until you've done it. Like,
yeah.
So I think I thought it was good, but now I know it wasn't good. It's probably more like, so when I first started, I was filming wrong. So I was filming portrait or filming landscape rather than up and down. Mm-hmm. Making my videos, I had these weird edges on them and shit.
Right.
So that was wrong. And then, so I was doing that. And that's when Stone found me. And he's like, you need to record up and down. Like, this is ridiculous. You look insane. Right. Nobody wants to see it. Like, okay. But I mean, one of my first series was called Just the Tip with Coach Nick.
All right. Spoken as definitely as a former dating coach.
Right. Yeah. Just the Tip with Coach Nick. And I actually thought I was going to go into men's work exclusively. And it turned out very much like that. Although I work with quite a lot of women these days. But yeah, I mean, those first videos were terrible. And if you're wanting to get into content and you really want to do this for a living, you need to be prepared. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they try and monetize way too fucking fast. Like, I've got a friend who's like, I'm selling courses, and I'm like, nobody knows who the fuck you are. What are you selling? Like, you need to be prepared for like 2 straight years of making no money. Money, right? Yeah. Like, now I got lucky in that I have a coaching skill set. I do have a pretty good presence on camera. I blew up within about 5 months. I started to see real traction. But like my first year, dude, I think I had 5 total clients. I mean, it was tight, like
Yeah.
tight. It was, I mean, I was living in South America because I had to.
Oh, okay.
Like, it was, I couldn't have done what I did in California.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, that casts the Costa Rica chapter in a different light now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was a part of me that I think the Costa Rica was kind of a gaffe, really. I was like, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. Because I always wanted to go, and I'd never left the country and by myself and whatever. And it was fine. But the next part of the journey, like when I was in Panama, that's when things really, I think I got there in May. No, I got there in June in Panama. Um, and ended up signing up for this coaching workshop, like how to grow your coaching business in 10 weeks or less, whatever. And it's all garbage, by the way. If you are trying to start a channel, listen to me right now. Just don't sign up for that shit. Unless it's Stone's class, because that actually is valuable information. But so I signed up for this thing, and basically they say, make videos. Best of luck. Like, oh, all right. So I started making videos, and it was 3 a day, and I didn't see north of 500 total followers across all platforms until December 1st.
That's very interesting. I follow a guy that coaches people on YouTube video creation, Daryl Eves. Maybe you know who he is.
I don't, but I'll look him up.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. But he does a lot of videos, and he talks to content creators, and he shows the data on the back end. And a very, very common theme is like nothing for like 2 years, just like you said. And then boom. And then just some unsuspecting piece of content pops, and then everything else goes with it. Yeah. But yeah, those first 2 years, just nothing.
Yeah. And I think it will be 2 more years until I hit another big jump. I'm growing pretty consistently right now. So my TikTok though is not growing at all. I mean, at all. And that's where I got it. Like,
interesting.
So it was December 2nd. I put out a video. Duane, the first time it was, I think I got 4,000 views, and I was fucking losing my mind. I was so excited.
I'm famous.
Right. I was like, holy shit, one actually hit. Right. That was the first time I'd ever seen 1,000 views, let alone 5,000, 4,000. Right. And that was December 1st. December 7th. Or no, it was December. That was Thanksgiving. It was day before Thanksgiving. And then December 3rd, my girlfriend and I were struggling, and she had left. She'd gone to go do something else. It wasn't going to be around me for like 2 months. And I was really sad. And I knew I needed to make content anyway. It's like always my thing is like, you got to go when you don't want to go. And so I went out and I made this video. It's called The Real Cost of People Pleasing, Volume 15. And it was about emotions. And I did this thing where it's like real cost of people pleasing. And then I had this whole spiel. And then at the very end, I was just pissed off. And I said, unless of course you're burying this, or you're burying this underneath substance abuse, then you're probably fine. It was just a joke. And then, like I always do, right? Yeah. That little hit at the end tripped up the algorithm, and the fucking video goes from like, I woke up in the morning after I posted that, and I was like, and I forgot that I'd posted. And I go to work. I was in Florida at the time. I go to work and do my thing at work. I do a meeting, helping with the company, whatever. And then I pull up my phone at like 10:30 in the morning, and I had 30,000 views. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool, right? And I have like 1,900 followers. I went from like 100 to 1,900. Like, wow, cool.
Right. Yeah.
Damn thing ran to 3 million. And I ended up with like 20,000 followers in like a 4-day timeline.
That's wild.
And then that launched my first client in 21. And then I got another one I got 2 more rather at the end of 21. So I got 3 in 21.
Even after having millions of views.
Right. 3.
Got it.
Right. So this is December. I got 3 total clients in 21. And then 22 did okay. I think we had slightly more. And then 23 was a good year. We've done really well this year. But so, just that progression was interesting. But I didn't get any Instagram fame really, in whatever fame is for me, until February of this year.
That's probably about when you popped onto my radar.
Right. It was March of this year. I had started repurposing my TikTok content over to IG.
Yep.
I was doing it through a platform. So I had repurpose.io was dumping my shit over there. Right. Well, I noticed on Facebook that it says posted by repurpose.io, which means the algorithms can read that. So I stopped doing that, dumped it into a folder, and then I would repurpose it myself.
Got it.
So I changed the way I did it. Well, I scheduled like 10 pieces of content because we were flying back to go to her brother's wedding. Same story. Like one of my old videos just hit the algorithm just right. And I wake up in the morning and I'm like, at that point, I had 1,500 followers on Instagram. And now I have 360,000.
That's awesome.
Like if you're a content and dude, I don't know why. Okay. So let me just express that as a real thing. None of us know why this works. Mr. Beast can tell you all day long that he understands the algorithm, and I bet on a fundamental level he does better than I do, but it's kind of like worshiping a god. You don't really know what it wants.
Just say your prayers.
It's there and it's trying to do something.
Right.
Right? So nobody knows what it wants.
But the consistency is that's the one thing I hear all the time from every content creator I listen to or observe, that it's the consistent output of stuff. And that theme, again, the thing that pops off will surprise you every time.
Every damn time.
I have no idea.
It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Like I could tell you all day long, all the reasons that I was successful. I have no idea. I'll never know. I know that I'm relatively good on camera and sometimes I'm pretty funny. But,
right.
Be yourself and post a lot. Like quantity in the beginning is the most important thing you can do.
What was it like to keep posting once you kind of, let me rephrase that.
Sure.
Was there ever a point when you're in the early stages, when you're posting, when you're painfully aware of your shortcomings? Like, was it hard to do, or was you kind of like blissfully, ignorant of it, or what was that like?
Every single day. It was just awful every day. Awful. It was awful. It was the worst goddamn job ever.
Well, what kept you going?
I didn't know what the alternative was, right? Like my thought was I want to launch a coaching company and I want to work from anywhere in the world. Okay. And I knew my budget. So I knew, and I'd set my goals. It's one of the things you can do is like, don't set your goals on lagging measures, set it all on leading measures. So my goal was to post 3 times a day.
When you say lagging measures versus leading, we'll explain that.
Okay. So a leading measure. So think of it this way. Your bank account is the lagging measure of how much time and effort you put into your financial mentality, right? So if you save a bunch of money, that's a leading measure. Having a bunch of money saved over a 3-year timeline, let's say you have $100,000 in the bank, the leading measure is the $1 a day you put in there. The lagging measure is $100K.
Okay, so the lagging is the aggregate result.
Right. So going to the gym is the leading measure. Having big biceps is the lagging measure.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, got it.
So if you put your goals on lead measures rather than lag measures, you're going to have a lot more success because you can celebrate wins easier. And lagging measures are tough to predict.
So in other words, celebrate for doing 7 pieces of content during the week rather than hitting 1 million followers.
Right. And let me stress one more time. If you are putting out content and you're trying to be a content creator, put out 3 pieces a day. I don't want to hear anything other than that. It's 3 pieces. It's 21 a week.
Gary Vee talks like that too.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with anything except for you have to get really good at this. And the more you do it, the better you get.
Interesting.
Like they all say, well, the algorithm, it's nothing to do with that.
It's like a numbers game. You just have to pull the lever a certain number of times.
So here's the question. Like, do you think I'm more or less comfortable in front of a camera now that I've done literally 3,000 videos?
Well, that's one of my questions on my list right here. You said something earlier that leads me to believe that I mean, you said in one of your videos that you still have this nagging self-doubt that follows you along even to this day. So I'm going to say you still have moments of self-doubt in front of the camera.
100%. They're easier to deal with now. But okay, so I'll give you an example right now. Something I know I'm procrastinating is long form content. I'm scared to death. I don't know how to do long form content. I don't know how to be interesting for 15 fucking minutes. I can do that for a minute and 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it for 3 minutes if I really try hard. But like YouTube, the fuck am I going to do on YouTube?
Is that on your radar?
I mean, it's got to be.
It sounds like it is.
Right. For me to scale, I have to do it. Like for me to figure out the next step is that, YouTube doesn't pay the way it used to, which is positive news in some way for me. Because, it's not that much of a priority. My business is doing really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's new things I got to do. Like I struggle with writing static posts, for instance, like on Instagram. I know that I could probably grow all of my channels better if I was to put up static rather than video. So like my Facebook following is interesting. It's blowing up right now. It's gone from I think it's at 80,000, which is a lot for Facebook. Right. So, or 83,000, I think was the last time I saw it. Anyway, it started to grow when I started putting up photo content. Like just pictures with words.
Interesting.
Those Gen X and boomers have a tendency to like pictures with words.
Right.
Right. They also have more money to spend on shit like coaching. So that's what it is.
That's perfect.
But so when I really think about, what's next, of course, there's still that fear, there's still the trepidation, and, don't let any coach ever fool you that they have it figured out. We coach what we want to know the most.
You just started answering my next question, and that is, do you consider yourself the guru or the student?
Yes, I guess. If somebody wants to call me their guru, they can. I'm never going to reside in an ashram. I don't wear enough beads. My hair's all gone. Like, I don't think I look like a good guru. Maybe I look like, unless Aang from Avatar was a guru. I mean, maybe then. Right. But realistically, I think I'm not real comfortable with being a guru because I think, coach, I think coach is fine. I think, I think if you're unwilling to learn from your clients, then you're doing yourself a disservice. I learned quite a lot from my people that work with me. And they know, I tell them in their engagements, like, I learn a lot from you, and don't be surprised if you see my language shifting along with you and me growing with you, because I realize things through our work. And that's part of why it's, important. I think where coaching gets fucked up is when the coach stops being humble, and stops learning and stops letting those real situations impact them. Like, I have clients that will cry, with me, and I will cry with them, and I'll have these big moments that are really powerful moments. If I was so hung up in my title of coach or guru or Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, I wouldn't be able to have those things. And I didn't really do this for, seems like I'm probably on some sort of a fame track, I guess. Getting a lot of invites to do shit like this, and I've got a book that's kind of in works, and like I've got a lot of cool stuff going on that I never thought I would have in my life. Yeah. One of my clients is a really successful guy. He said, "Don't let the megalomania go to your head." And I'm like, I wouldn't, dude. Most of the time, I can't even believe I'm me. Like, I don't get to be this guy. Like, this isn't fair. There's so many people that know much more than me, that are probably more talented than me. It's not fair, and that's okay.
So how do you make friends with that sense? You were talking about those feelings of inadequacy a minute ago, and on that other video. How have you come into a working relationship with them so that you're acknowledging them, but you can still show up in powerful ways as a coach?
I think I've had to ask myself a lot of questions, like powerful. I coach myself quite a lot, but if you want to know the answer to the question, like the just like carte blanche face forward answer is, I have coaches. Like, don't hire a coach that doesn't have coaches. You're crazy. Like, people say that to me, I've got a great coach, and I'm like, cool. Who's his coach?
Even Tiger Woods has a coach.
Right. Like, if your coach doesn't have a coach and a therapist, you've got the wrong coach.
Fascinating. Yeah.
I see both. I see them consistently every single week without fail.
What's something you've learned from one of your coaches recently?
That's a really good question. Well, Stone, interestingly, so Stone Fredrickson, the guy who taught me how to TikTok, he's a 20-year-old kid, and is one of my coaches.
He's half your age.
Yeah, he's half my age, and he's one of my coaches.
I love that.
One of the most brilliant kids I've ever met. And if my children are listening, sorry, kids, he's a pretty smart kid.
The bar's been set, kids.
Stone is he's like a younger brother to me, but he's also a really talented coach. He was talking to me about being coachable. And we were having a real conversation around some challenges in my personal life and some things that were going on. And he said, you tend to torture yourself over the shit you can't control. And for somebody who teaches people not to torture themselves over shit you can't control, what is the belief system that you would have to keep doing that?
Wow.
I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. What? So he's a really impressive kid, but I learned a lot of discipline from my coaches. One of my other really great one is a guy named Greg Morton. And he's a coach and therapist to me. And we talk a lot about self-sabotage, because my pattern over my life has been when things get really good, just about the time I do something stupid to fuck it all up.
Right. Can't have that.
Right. And we've had to talk through that quite a lot. And something I've learned to ask myself through working with Greg has been, is this who I am? Right. And if I'm in these headspaces, like I notice, so I mentioned in my videos a lot that I'm a recovered alcoholic. That means that I allow myself to drink. I will not be, subject to fear for the rest of my life. So like if I have a glass of wine at a night, that's fine. Right. And I don't end up going off the rails anymore, which is amazing and a gift, because I do love wine and I love good steak, and I am who I am. So when I notice little things, and this came from Greg, I was talking to him the other day and said, I've been wanting to drink. And he goes, like, wanting to drink or like wanting to drink? That eager want that occurs inside the brain of somebody who's, fundamentally fucked up. And I said, wanting to drink. He goes, what do you think that is? And when I heard him ask that question, I'm like, oh shit, that means I'm pointing at something that I don't like. That means I'm scared of something. So when I start to feel those things, and that's the stuff I learned from my coaches now is mostly around the self-awareness idea.
Right.
Where I was like, oh shit, I'm pointed at something that's scary to me. So now I can ask, okay, and then I get curious. And when I'm curious, I'm really dangerous. Right. I go, okay, what am I scared about? And then I'm like, oh, it's the book. Right. And I'm like looking at the book. And this was about 3 or 4 months ago. I'm like, I really want this. Like, I really want to do this book. And this ghostwriter, I hired a collaborative ghostwriter, which means I'm writing it and they're helping me structure it. Mm-hmm. And this ghostwriter had sent me a bunch of pages and they were garbage.
Oh.
And I was like, ew. I didn't know what to do. And I felt all people pleasing inside and I wanted to just drink it away. And instead, I had to just do the thing that was scary to me, which was say, hey, this is dog shit.
Right.
So
you learned that urge to like really want to drink is just kind of like your personal, like your soul's vocabulary for I'm scared of something right now.
Mm-hmm. Something's scaring us.
Oh, well, right. That's so powerful.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
it's such a cool gauge. And there's a book that talks about something like that too. It's one of my favorite books. It's really kind of now, 50 years after it was written, it's kind of bullshit. But it's called Psycho-Cybernetics by a guy named Maxwell Maltz. And he talks about how the emotions are very much like a boiler system inside your body. And there's got to be like a pressure relief valve. And my pressure relief valve for the longest time was drinking. Right. But it's not a very effective pressure relief valve.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it just stokes the fire. And then when you close it, you're fucked. Right. So that was something that I've kind of always taken with me from that book. But now I see it. Right. And I can do something with it. I also noticed this happens to me in kind of this self-awareness vein is if I start arguing with people on like Facebook or Instagram, and you can hold me to this, anybody that's listening, or even you, if you see me starting to get into arguments, you shoot me a DM and be like, hey motherfucker, what's going on with you? Because that's sort of a key indicator. But like, I know when I'm being a dickhead, there's something going on with me.
I can relate to that for sure. Like I've gotten into arguments before, and the next day I'll come back to him and be like, God damn, dude, what were you all about yesterday? Like this, because this isn't about this mystery person on the internet. They're just a string of characters, like why did I need to show up like that?
They're blowing off their steam, and and I caught myself doing it the other day. So my standardized response now to haters, which I'm, as I grow, I get more and more of, and my messaging admittedly is getting exponentially more caustic, but the response I'm giving to the haters is thank you for your comment. It helps the algorithm know that I exist. It shows me to all your friends and family.
That's perfection.
Right. And that usually shuts them up.
Right.
Or I'll get a fuck you or whatever. You're a piece of shit. Or you don't respond to anybody who doesn't like you. Well, here's the thing. Like, the other one I'm getting a lot of is like, what's your pedigree is kind of the question I get a lot of, like, this is what it looks like when you're a coach and not a medical trained professional, to which I respond, which one are you?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, you're neither. So shut the fuck up.
For sure.
Right. So I generally, I'm playing the game a little different, but I do have to be cognizant of the fact that my messaging is becoming a bit more caustic. I'm really leaning into being semi-offensive right now.
What's that all about? Because I feel you on that, but I'm just curious what's fueling that for you.
I'm just grumpy.
Yeah?
Yeah, this time of year just kind of irritates me.
Yeah?
And I don't make, this is weird, but I don't make content for anyone but me.
Right.
Like, so if I'm feeling a thing, I just kind of do it. And I say what I mean, and I don't care if anybody likes it.
That's very unpeople pleasing of you. Walking the walk.
Right. Well, I mean, the whole channel is people displeaser, Yeah. I think, and one I said the other day, and this is interesting. This one really was fascinating. Is like, I said, what if there's nothing wrong with you? Like, what if the ADD and the CPTSD and the labels and the body dysmorphia and, the eating disorders, what if all of that isn't wrong with you? Like, what if there's nothing really wrong with you? Then you would have to start dealing with the problem, right? Because if you personify a problem, you say, I have ADD, right? Rather than ADD is something I'm working on.
Right.
Right. I have ADD. I have body dysmorphia. I. If you constantly focus that inward eye on like everything that's wrong with you, you can't, like, then you become the problem. And that's all I was saying is like, you're not the problem. You have problems. And when you look at the problems as an objective measure and say, okay, I can fix that. Like, you can fix body dysmorphia. Oh, no, don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Right? You can fix an eating disorder. You can fix addiction. You can fix ADD. You can fix ADHD. You can fix all of it. I mean, listen, you're talking to a guy who struggled with ADHD his entire life. Dyslexic. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder ought to be my middle name. The traumas I suffered when I was a child are so fucking profound that they kill most people. Then they go through it. I just don't talk about it because it doesn't matter. So like I'm playing with this idea for my book. So what?
in college, I studied psychology, specifically behavior analysis. And so I was a BF Skinner kind of guy, and one of the things one of my key professors and mentors really hammered home was this idea that these concepts, depression, anxiety, ADHD, they don't reside inside your brain. There's not like, you can't do an autopsy and find like, oh, well, sure enough, there's the ADHD, or there's the body dysmorphia right there in that part of the cortex. These are kind of just labels we apply to behaviors. And so, he would suggest we talk about it like, I do body dysmorphia, right? I do anxiety, they're things that we do. And so then we, that it does a couple things. That separates your personal identity from them, but it also makes it so much more actionable. It's not a part of your identity anymore. It just does a lot of the right things.
I think we see a lot of this idea, like, attention deficit disorder. Okay. That's just a disordered way of thinking. It means your thinking's out of order. So put it in order.
Right. Adapt.
Okay. Right. Adapt. Yep.
Yeah.
I've had to adapt. Like, I'm nuts. I know I'm nuts. It's fine.
Right.
Like, I'm a happy kind of nuts. And so I'll look, this is the other thing that I've been seeing a lot in the PG world, the personal growth world. It's like these long ass diatribe, wake up in the morning routines. Okay, I'm going to tell you what my morning routine looks like. Speaking of ADD, let me go off on this tangent quickly and then we'll come back. But I get up in the morning, I put on my bathrobe, I feed my 2 cats, and then I drink coffee until my brain turns back on. Then I sit in front of my computer where I read a book for 30 minutes, and then I write for 20 minutes. That's my whole routine. It takes about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the top 10% of all life coaches in the world.
Top 10%.
I don't do any of
in what regard?
In regard to income.
Oh, okay.
In the world, in the top 10%.
And that's your routine. I love that.
Right. And here's the thing. I don't do it because it's like what makes me successful. I do it because I've always done it.
Right. Just works for you.
But when I do notice there's one thing. If I don't write every day, I can't create content after about a week.
Okay. I love that you said that. I'm a morning writer as well. Mm-hmm. In the tradition of the artist's way, morning pages.
Okay.
It sounds like you're familiar.
I've read a little, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I love that, and I'm the same way. I find that that process totally opened up my creativity. When I'm not being creative, I can almost always trace it back to I haven't been doing my morning pages, or I skipped over them, or I didn't tell the whole truth in them a couple days ago, or there's like something I'm not like spilling the beans about myself. Is that how it is for you?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. Like, if I don't read something empowering, like I'm reading a book called Letting Go right now. If you haven't read it, it's really good. A little bit in this hokey vein of like manifestation, but it's still pretty cool stuff. And I'm really enjoying it. But so I'm always reading a book like that. And then I always try and write. If I write every morning, my content comes pretty easy. If I don't write, my content comes out like shit. It's fascinating. And if I don't do it for 2 days, I literally can't do content. Like
Same way.
Cannot.
I totally get it.
I'll go for a walk to go and do my walk and talk thing. I'll walk for 3 hours before I get one video out. If I write for a week consistently, I get up, I do it every day, and I record consistently every single day. Damnedest thing. I can knock out 3 pieces of content in like 30 minutes.
How do you personally account for that?
I don't.
Okay.
When you say account for it, what do you mean?
Like, why do you think it works that way for you?
I have no idea.
Okay. There's a quote, and maybe you'll know the source of this. I believe it was an author who said something to the extent of, how can I know what I'm thinking except that I write it down?
Maybe.
Something along those lines.
I find that writing both morning and night is helpful to me. ADD is it's a thing. Okay. I never said it wasn't. Anybody who's pissed off at me, I didn't say your ADD wasn't a thing. I said it's a manageable thing. And one of the ways I manage it is like overthinking is a problem for people with ADD. So I go to bed at night and I write for 15 minutes and just write everything. I don't write anything substantive. I'm not writing my book. I just write whatever's in my head, and then I go to bed.
Just
Generally,
download.
right? Generally, I'll if I'm really kind of in my head, then I'll write like, what am I going to do in the morning? Which is funny because I know what I'm going to do in the morning. I literally will wake up, put on my robe, as many cups of coffee as it takes, pet my cats, read my book, write my shit, record content.
Right.
Right. But in my morning, one of the things I do that I find helpful is I write my goals every day. Like my big goals, like I write my 5-year goal, my 1-year goal, and my daily goal every day.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I write it down every day.
Interesting. I write my daily stuff every day in my journal as part of my process. But tell me, what is including the longer term goals, what do you find that does for you?
I've never put anything in that journal that I didn't hit.
Hell yeah.
Which is interesting. And so I started to realize that, and I was like, how big can I go on this? So I'm writing some big stuff in there. It's crazy what's going in there right now. And I write it every single day. And and the other thing is that because I write it every day, I think it helps me release the results of my work. Like, because I write it every day, I'm not constantly focused on like, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get there? I just kind of write it and then I forget about it. And because of that, I think it's just kind of in my subconscious doing what it's doing.
Right.
And figuring out how to do.
Do you ever have a part of your brain that as you're writing down the big goals says like, what the hell are you thinking, man? Like, what are you really going to write that down? Do you have that voice?
Yeah, that's the stuff I write the most.
I love that.
But I just keep writing it, right? Like, so I've written down my big, hairy goal for 5 years. My 5-year goal, I've written it down every day for like 6 months. So that's pretty new, that 5-year everyday goal. And at first I was like, this is stupid. You're never going to get that. Then like day 2, 4, 10, it's kind of the same situation. But like by day 30, I'm like, well, yep, that's what we're doing. Just writing it every single day. And
I love that I love that you brought that up because I used to do something very similar to that. I had a section in my journal where I would speak about the way I intend my life to go in the present tense, as if it's already happened. Like, man, I love this car. I love the way the leather smells. I'd get into the senses of it. I'd talk about my goals as if they're already here and soak them in gratitude. And then I don't know what happened, but I kind of like got out of that routine, that one part of my routine. So hearing you say this is reminding me like I really need to.
So the only change I would say is like I used to do it exactly like you're talking about with like the gratitude soak and the whole thing. I don't spend that much time on it because that ends up becoming frustration.
I like that you're just saying you just like make it brief though, right?
I just write it down, I look at it, I agree with it, send it on its way.
I love that. That feels better.
I don't need to sit and be grateful and pretend I have it now. Alex Hormozi talks about this the other day. I saw him in a video. He makes me laugh all the time. Like, I can't wait to meet him. I will eventually. Like, Alex, you and I are going to be friends.
Incidentally, at our company, we're all about Alex Hormozi right now too.
Yeah, I love
like our CEO is just like got a man crush on Alex Hormozi, and that's all we're talking about.
Right, he's really bright, and he's
for sure.
One of the things he talked about is this dude sent him an email. He's got this 3-hour morning routine. It's like I wake up every morning, I do an ice bath, then I get in a red light sauna, then I go outside in the ground, and then I write my gratitude journal. And then by like 6 a.m., I'm ready to go. And he goes, well, I mean, you could not do any of that and then just work for 3 extra hours a day. And I bet you'd make more money. Oh. But see, culturally, we're in this headspace right now of everybody's trying to get rich and nobody's trying to get real. And like the entrepreneurs that I see, there's this other jack off who talks about he has a 4-hour morning routine where he does I think he said, I don't know, it's awful. Like I do a reverie with my wife. I'm like, dear God.
A reverie?
Yeah. Where and then they co-create their best bodies together in the mind palace. And I'm like, dear Christ, you sound terrible. So basically what I heard in this, and I'll send you the clip. You can even put it in this.
Okay.
It's so ridiculous. But like, Basically, what I heard was he gets up in the morning. So that's what it is. He gets up in the morning. He listens to a book on double speed for 30 minutes. So he gets up and pretends like he's getting information for 30 minutes.
Right.
Then he emotionally abuses his wife for 2.5 hours, at the end of which he abuses his kids. And then they all go off about their work day. Jesus, you sound terrible, bro. There's the other guy who said he's figured out how to get 3 days out of every day. Oh, God.
Ed Milet.
Good.
Ed Milet talks about that. He has 3 days in every day. Like his 6 to 12 is 12 to 6, and his 6 to 12 or something.
It didn't move time and space. You just segmented your day.
Yeah.
Like you're not. And he goes, I've figured out how to recreate time. He does it with his hands. I'm like, easy, Dr. Spock. It's going to be okay. Yeah, fucking real here.
That's so funny.
I have those moments in the personal growth world, but no, I think all of that is. I don't think there's any real wrong way to do it. But in my world, like I don't want to sit and meditate for 25 minutes. I meditate for like a minute and a half every day. Like, all right, we got this. We're good. Okay. Like just to check in. I don't need to sit. I'm not going to be sitting again. I'm not going to climb the steps to go meet the Maharishi, and like I don't need that. Okay, like I don't need to smudge myself with sage every 15 minutes. I don't need to sit here among elder flowers and drink milk of the poppy or whatever it is I'm supposed to do. I don't have time. Right.
I think I personally think that writing process is a meditation, because you're observing your thoughts. Like there are a lot of meditation people who talk about it's not about having a clear mind. It's about just being the observer of what's in your mind and being present to it. And in that journaling stuff, that's how I take it. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. And I agree. I think it's valuable for me, and it works for me. I think more people need to do what works for them. One of the things you see in my videos is like people get super pissed off at me. Okay, well, don't watch. Like I'm not your guy. So what? Like a whole chapter of my book is gonna be like, so what? Right. Like you're abused. So what? You have ADD. So what?
Now what?
So what? Like not in the like the flippant. So what? Like so what? What are you gonna do now? Like. Are you going to be a miserable piece of shit for the rest of your life? Or like, so what? Yeah. Like I was abused. So what? I made a life for myself out of that trauma and have helped others now.
Yeah.
Right. And have grown and changed. And I live very, very happily. And I figured out that who my dad was a defective character, not good. And through that, I was able to like increase my awareness, become more happy, and to live my life. So what?
I love what you said about, you reflected on this moment of having trauma and then, transmuting it into another life. What advice do you have for people who are in a similar kind of spot where they're, they had some trauma, they've come out on the other end, they feel like they're on the healing end of the bell curve of that trauma, and they want to show up in the world and do what you do? What's your advice?
You're never on the healing end of trauma.
Oh, okay.
So people pleasing, or let's call it, pick a disorder. That trauma is going to be with you. You're not going to forget. So stop trying to forget and start living with it, not against it. Right? So stop saying, I'm healing from my trauma. Say, I am past that part. Like the trauma is over. Okay? The suffering is your choice. The trauma wasn't your choice. The suffering is your choice. Choose to no longer suffer. Right? Or choose your suffering well is even more important. Right? Mm-hmm. So somebody asked me once recently, like, how do I define personal freedom? It's to choose how you suffer.
Right.
You can suffer healing, or you can suffer in misery. Right? Healing hurts. Suffer, like being miserable, hurts. You just pick which one you'd rather do, right? And every problem you solve is going to create another one after it.
Yeah,
which is okay, right? That's just part of. That's why I said, like, the clock doesn't stop until your heart stops beating, which means the game goes on.
Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for those who would want to then take the things they've learned and start turning it into a business like you have?
Start talking. Start talking, start writing, start recording, just pick up the camera. Like Duane, I don't have equipment still. Like, I mean, I'll show you. You want to see my camera?
Mm-hmm. iPhone.
That's it.
Yep.
I own this and this microphone. Like, that's it.
That's beautiful.
Right. I don't know that I'll ever change that because I don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll get a camera that I could maybe be easier, a little more balanced so it's not as wobbly, but I like doing it on my iPhone.
It's been working.
Right. And it's working. And sometimes we get wind. Like, I don't know. Like,
I've never listened to any of your videos and thought, man, if only he could just get a better mic.
right.
I can hear you fine.
And nobody ever bitches about that. So I get, sometimes I turn the music up too loud. No, I think that's the thing I would say is like, if you have experience, the biggest thing I think that holds people back is that, kind of idea of imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I don't believe in imposter syndrome. It's going to make me unpopular, but I don't.
Okay. Do tell.
So I think it's just fear. Like, just stop calling everything a syndrome. You're afraid. So be afraid and do it anyway. Right. And sure, when I showed up online, it wasn't that I felt like an imposter. I was afraid. I was afraid I'd look stupid. I was afraid people would think I was stupid. It's not a syndrome. That's fear. Like, you have fear. It's fine. You're just afraid. Right. When you do new shit, you're going to be afraid.
So it's like imposter syndrome is just wrapping paper for the actual fear.
Yeah. All like syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, yeah, you're afraid of looking stupid, afraid of criticism, these are all super normal fears that are like 100%. Encoded into our DNA for sure.
But when some psychologist, and this is where, people say to me, well, what degree do you have? I'm like, thank God I don't have one in psychology. Because I'd wrap this up in some bullshit syndrome and you'd never be able to solve it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So like imposter syndrome. I don't know. Let me explain. Make videos and it goes away.
I love that.
Right.
I love that all day long. Yeah.
Here's fascinating. And here's how I know imposter syndrome, at least for me, was not a syndrome. Okay. Because I proved a theory of mine that fear is the only thing that gets smaller the closer you get to it.
That's beautiful.
The more I confront the shit that scares me, the more it shrank. And I was afraid of making videos. If you ask my girlfriend, I used to I would get so worked up, I'd almost cry before I'd make videos.
Wow. I love knowing that.
Like, I really I would be so scared. And I didn't like it. And I felt uncomfortable. At one point, I did one on Facebook where I was so afraid of looking stupid that I turned on my Facebook Live because it was the only platform that would let me go live. I didn't have enough followers yet. Remember, I couldn't go on TikTok Live until December of 21. And I'd been recording for almost a year. So, because you needed 1,000 users. Oh, so right. I went live on Facebook and I just sat there eating my cereal in silence with my friends asking me, what the hell are you doing?
And was that just your confrontation with fear? Just showing up?
Just being on camera and being like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm trying to launch this coaching company online. I'm trying to do this thing. Really something that I think is powerful, that I think I'm only realizing even really now and through this conversation partly, is it was when I stopped trying to launch a company that I started to have fun making content. It was when I thought that it wasn't going to work and that I was probably going to have to just come home and quit, that I really started having fun making content.
When you let go of attachment to the outcome.
Right. And I don't think I realized that until just now. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I had been failing so big for months and I just kind of let go. And I was pretty well prepared. Okay, I can go back to roofing, I'll save up some money, and I'll go travel again. And then I'll just go back to roofing and I'll save, I just kind of prepared my heart for the idea that I probably wasn't going to make it, but I was going to keep trying no matter what. I'm going to keep doing the 3 a day, but I'm going to do what I enjoy. And when I let go of the result, everything changed.
it's like that in a lot of places in life. Love is kind of like that, like, as you know, as a former dating coach.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, there's kind of a zen to being in this space of, I would like to achieve success at this thing I love doing, and I'm going to be unattached to whether it happens or not.
Right.
It's weird.
It's weird. It doesn't feel, it feels disingenuous when you say it. But when you do it on accident, it's actually really interesting. Like, I don't think I realized I had done it literally until just now. It was like, you asked that question, you know what? It was when I stopped trying to make this a business that I started to have fun with it, and it became a business.
Right.
Because I wanted, when my mission changed, right? Because I'd taken this course by a guy named Preston Smiles, which I don't recommend. The dude is a snake oil salesman, bigger than shit. I'm happy to say it on any podcast anywhere. But I don't recommend his courses. Don't do that. But I took the course, and it was all about how to make $1 million as a coach. And it felt like shit. And it felt gross and slimy. And the course ended up being gross and slimy. I'm like, when I think back, it was like, okay, well, how many clients would I need at this price point to keep going? It was 1 a month, right? For us to just keep traveling and having fun, kind of doing the thing and not really stressing out, but just keep going, right? It was 1 a month. And I remember when I hit that number. And I was like, wow, okay. We're okay. We are okay. And I wanted to make a lot of money, but I was making enough to keep us going. And South America's cheap. And when I realized, like, okay, we are okay. We are going to be okay. I'd set my goals at a really reasonable target, like do that, set your goals at a really reasonable target, focus on the leading measures, and don't worry about making it a business. It'll become a business and we'll do it. But you got to do the work first. Like, the business is the reward.
Right. It's the big muscles that come after, 24 months of going to the gym every day.
Right. Like, I've been in the gym. Great example is the gym. Like, I've been in the gym every day for the last month. I've lost 15 pounds. I look great, feel amazing. I'm in amazing shape. But that wasn't how it started. Right. Like, I've been in pain also for 6 weeks. Because my muscles hurt all the time. Because I'm 43 and I can't keep doing this shit. But, I'd gotten out of shape, but I'd let my body kind of get beat up, and I had to do the work to get it back to where I want it. And that's what life looks like. You got to do the work.
Love that. That's some great wisdom. Would it be okay if we switch gears now and talk music?
Sure.
Okay, so for those of you who are listening right now, we're going to merge into our bonus section. And as a music lover, I like to hear what people are passionate about listening to. I think it says a lot about who they are. And so, you're going to find this over on the Soul Anarchist website. So go on over there and check it out. And let's just pop the clutch and shift into another gear here. So, Nick, let's talk music. So your 4 favorite songs,
okay,
in no particular order. Tell me one, and then I may have some questions for you about it.
All right. So I was born in 1980, which puts me on the tail end of Gen X in that kind of exennial.
All right, that wraps up the main part of the show. Now we're going to move on to our bonus episode. Hopefully you'll be joining us there. Go over to the show notes at soulanarchist.com. Find the Nick Pollard People Displeaser episode. Find the bonus episode there. He's going to be sharing his 4 favorite songs and making a case for why they're the greatest ones ever. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You can tell them to find the Soul Anarchist podcast on any of the major podcasting apps, or just send them this link from soulanarchist.com. If you've loved today's show, consider picking up some Soul Anarchist merch. Pick up a fresh new Soul Anarchist t-shirt, and you can find those in the show notes again over at soulanarchist.com. Otherwise, if you've enjoyed Nick, you can connect with him at nickpollard.com. That's NICKPOLLARD.com. Or you can find him at The People Displeaser on Instagram and TikTok. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with us. Much love to you all. Until next time.